Psalms through Christ. Let's open it with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, all glory and honor and praise be to you, our Savior. Thank you for the gift of your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Send now your Spirit among us. Open your word for us, that our minds, hands, and hearts would be fully dedicated to serving you. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay. Christian discipleship has three aspects: study, prayer, and worship. Study, prayer, and worship. And this morning you get 2 for 1 because we're going to be studying the Word with an eye to prayer. This is a 2 for 1 Sunday evening because today is traditionally been regarded as Palm Sunday, celebrated in the church for hundreds of years as Palm Sunday, but within the last 100 years or so, it's also celebrated as Passion Sunday. So it's a 2 for 1 Sunday. And so you get 2 for 1 here this morning in our study of the Psalms, I hope. Anyway, we'll read at least 3 Psalms, 1, 2, and 3. And we may also get into some additional Psalms that are traditionally assigned to Palm Sunday or Passion Sunday. And why are we doing this? Well, in 25 words or less, the book of Psalms is regarded as the prayer book of the Bible. To some extent, of course, you could regard the entire Bible as a symphony of prayer, God's prayer to humanity. But elevated within the Bible are the Psalms. The Christian faithful have always turned to the Psalms. In the New Testament, there are more references to the Psalms than any other book in the Old Testament. And we, as Christians, believe, in essence, that the Psalms are the prayers of the church, that we learn to pray by praying the Psalms with Christ. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was quite strong about this, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I think most of you know who he was. He was the evangelical pastor, Lutheran pastor, who gave witness to his Christian faith during the Third Reich, and was executed upon the orders of Adolf Hitler in the closing days of World War II. He became one of the leaders in the so-called confessing church. That was the element of the German evangelical church that refused to take an oath of allegiance to Adolf Hitler. And he wrote a number of works in the 1920s and 30s. Among them, we discussed this about a year and a half ago when I last talked about the Psalms. He wrote a book called The Prayer Book of the Bible. The Psalms, the Prayer Book of the Bible. And in that, he makes a comment: if we want to read and to pray the prayers of the Bible, we must not ask first what they have to do with us, but what they have to do with Jesus Christ. And in essence, he and others have made the argument that the key to the Psalms, and indeed to the Bible, is Jesus Christ. And to fully appreciate the Psalms, we need to try to see Jesus Christ in the Psalms. Bonhoeffer even made a claim that basically the Psalms were the prayers that Jesus prayed. And we do know for a fact, of course, that at his crucifixion, Jesus did raise what we now call the 22nd Psalm. My God, why have you forsaken me? That is the beginning of Psalm 22. Dietrich Bonhoeffer makes the claim basically that all of these psalms were prayers that Jesus raised. You don't have to accept that, participate in this morning's session. I don't know that I accept it, but I do believe that we all benefit from the notion that to better understand the Psalms, we need to try to see Jesus in the Psalms. And in part of my continuing studies, this is kind of show and tell this morning, I guess. About a year and a half ago, I came across this book called Christ in the Psalms. And it's by Patrick Henry Reardon. With a name like that, sounds very patriotic. He's an anti-Orthodox priest in Chicago. And he published this work actually about 10 years ago. It's published by Conciliar Press, which is the press of the Orthodox Church in America, down in Chesterton, Indiana, where it's located of all places. Anyway, this is a beautiful book, I think, and I took the liberty of producing 2 pages from the book for just general edification and an introduction to what kind of stuff he's written. Basically, in this book, Father Reardon goes through each of the 150 Psalms, which are in the canon, and devotes 2 pages to every Psalm. Well, as it turns out, of course, in the Psalms we have the shortest and the longest chapters in the Bible. If you consider each Psalm as a chapter, the shortest Psalm or shortest chapter in the Bible is Psalm 117, which is 2 verses. He devotes 2 pages to that too. And the longest is 119, which is 176 verses. And he devotes 2 pages to that. But he does a wonderful job, I think. I recommend the book. It would be nice if we had it in our library. Probably something we should think about here at St. Matthew's and having it in the library. Now, be mindful, if you were to get this book, he uses the Orthodox numbering system for numbering the Psalms. The Orthodox numbering system is based on the Greek Septuagint Bible. That was the prevalent Bible that was used by the Jewish faithful at the time of Christ. It was a Greek Bible. It's called Septuagint because its belief is that there were roughly 70 men who were involved in translating the Bible from Hebrew to Greek. Greek being the lingua franca of the eastern part of the Roman Empire. So, and it was translated at Alexandria, which was probably the greatest learning center in the ancient world, at least during the Roman Empire. So the numbering system in here is Orthodox, obviously, because it's published by an Orthodox press, Conciliar Press. But he does us the courtesy of showing in parentheses the so-called Hebrew or Masoretic numbering, which is what we use in the Protestant Church. So there's just a minor variation in the numbering. But if you always look at the number that's in parentheses, if you ever use this book, you'll know that you're looking at the 22nd Psalm as we know it, or the 23rd, or the 48th, or whatever. Anyway, Father Reardon makes the claim that the first 3 Psalms in the Psalmody basically introduce certain thematic and formal structures that are prevalent throughout all the Psalms. And I found that an intriguing sort of viewpoint, and I think that particularly in terms of thematic, and I'll get at what I mean by thematic in a minute, I think is right on. It's a very insightful view of the Psalms. Formally, I did have some reservations about his remarks But I do think that the first three Psalms are particularly worth studying as a kind of an entree into seeing Christ in the Psalms. And that, after all, is the primary objective here this morning, and was the objective of Father Reardon when he wrote this book. How can we better see Christ in the Psalm? And he basically identifies three images of Christ that are in the Psalm. After all, in the Psalms, you aren't going to find any explicit reference to Jesus Christ in the Psalms. They were written long before Jesus walked the earth. But he claims that there are basically three kind of personal typologies that you see of Christ. The three are the new Adam, the Messiah, or the new David, and the suffering servant. Those are the three images of Christ in the Psalms. And so we'll read each of the first three Psalms this morning, and then talk a little bit about what's there. Would somebody be prepared to read Psalm 1 in its entirety? It's a shorty.
Sure, I'll go.
Yes, sir.
Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish.
Thank you, sir. I think you all have hopefully handout C. Handout C is an excerpt, as I say, from Father Reardon's book, and particularly his comments on Psalm 1. If you go to the last paragraph, and we'll get right to this theme of Christ in the Psalm. Obviously, the whole thing is worth reading, but I'm going to read just this last paragraph. There's a great deal more here that is in Psalm 1. Just who is this blessed man of whom the psalmist speaks? It is not man in general. In truth, it really is not simply a human being. The underlying words here translated as man are emphatically masculine, that is, gender-specific, in the original Hebrew, as well as the Greek and Latin versions. They are not the Hebrew and Greek nouns accurately translated as human being. The man of reference here is a particular man. According to the fathers of the church, he is the one mediator between God and man, the man Jesus Christ. The law of the Lord, which is to be our delight and meditation day and night, finds its meaning only in him. Christ is the one who fulfills it, and he is the key to its understanding. And indeed, he is the key to our understanding of the Psalm. Because so often in the Psalms, particularly in the cursing Psalms and things like that, you get this image of whoever's praying the prayer is entirely innocent, and everybody else is a mess. And obviously that can't describe any one of us as a human being, because we're all sinners. And thanks be to God, saints too. But we are sinners, and so the Psalms make the best sense if you see Christ in them. And Father Reardon is just making the point here that specifically in this very first psalm, in the psalmody, we're talking about not human beings, but a man in particular, and it's been the the thrust of the church's thinking from the very beginning to think of this man as being Jesus Christ. Just some comments, formal comments about this very first prayer in the book of prayers. What do you find missing here that you might expect in prayer? I mean, we have certain expectations, generally, cultural expectations of what a prayer is going to look like. What's missing there?
A request.
Request. This is not a request. This is not a petitionary prayer at all. It is not a petitionary prayer. And that is probably one of the most important lessons of the Psalms, is that not every prayer can be or should be petitionary prayer. I would argue a good service of worship, you should have all three kinds of prayer. I think there's three kinds of prayer. These are not the same identifications that Father Reardon makes, but there are three kinds of prayers as far as I'm concerned, in my study of the Psalms. There are prophetic prayers, there are Eucharistic prayers, and I don't identify that with what we ordinarily refer to as a Eucharistic prayer when we're having communion. But Eucharistic prayers, just prayers of thanksgiving, if you will, leave it at that for the time. There are Eucharistic prayers, there are prophetic prayers, and there are petitionary prayers. And of course, petitionaries are the ones that we ordinarily think of. In a service of worship in the Christian church, I would argue most of our Eucharistic prayers are offered in the form of songs, hymns. So often in the Psalms, you'll have the notion of thanksgiving and praise yoked together. Yoked together. Praise and thanksgiving go together. And so many of the hymns that we sing are hymns of praise. They are prayers. In that sense, Eucharistic prayers. The prophetic prayers are twofold, I think, in the church. They come with the reading of the Word. In essence, in some ways, I see the entire Bible as being prophetic. They're God's words to us, through human vehicles, to be sure, but they are God's words to us, prophetic, in the sense that a mother and a father are prophetic to their children, and a teacher is prophetic to her charges. We all have prophetic roles in life, primarily as mothers and fathers, but insofar as we have a role of teaching other people things, those are prophetic roles, because there's always a moral import to what we're doing. There's a reason. And, of course, we can be false prophets. But if we're true prophets, the prophets of the one living God revealed through Jesus Christ.
Excuse me, John,
Pardon me?
I don't quite understand the definition of that.
Prophetic in this sense is pedagogical, with a moral import. The prophet is not so much, we often think of prophecy as kind of prediction. But the interesting thing about prophecy is you always have to refer to the past to make any sense of the future. And that's in a sense what the teacher is doing in school, for example. It's the body of information that we have already gathered as a people, whoever that is, whether we're Walmart or this is English 101 or whatever. It's a body of knowledge that for some reason or another is worthy of your attention. It will make a difference in your life. It's important that you pay attention to this. Whether you want to be a better carpenter, or a better cook, or a better citizen, whatever it is. Prophecy. And it's a body of knowledge that you're supposed to know, or you should know, or that we know that we want to pass on to you. It comes from the past, and it has moral implications for your future. In that sense, it's pedagogical, prophetic in that sense. Anyway, Father Reardon doesn't divide up formally the Psalms in the way I've just done it for you, or the way I've claimed. I haven't done it for you, I've just made this initial claim. His formal division is petitionary prayers. Those are, of course, the first ones that come to mind. But be mindful, in the Psalms, you're going to see petitions not only to God, you're going to see petitions to other people. So they're, in that sense, admonitory. So there's petitionary prayers, there's meditative psalms or prayers, and there are narrative psalms or prayers. And this very first psalm in the psalmody obviously is not petitionary. God is not even mentioned, not even in third person. It doesn't get a mention. It almost comes across as the same sort of thing as you'd find in the book of Proverbs. Okay? The book of Proverbs, entirely wisdom literature. So here, we get the sense here in Psalm 1 of wisdom literature, as it were. This is what I call prophetic, meditative. Father Reardon would call this a meditative psalm. Okay? Any comments, questions on Psalm 1? Anyway, it doesn't fulfill our expectation, our cultural expectation of the prayer as always being petitionary. The very first prayer in the prayer book of the Bible is not petitionary. I think that's significant. Okay, Psalm 2. By the way, with each of these psalms, I supplied the psalms, I think maybe even before they ever had numbers, had names. And basically the names are, and you'll see the names here, are in Latin, in parentheses. That's just simply the way that the psalm starts out. In Latin, it would be actus vir. Vir is a word for man, as the head in his comment. So that's just the way the psalm starts out. So it turns out, of course, some psalms, because they start out exactly the same way, have the same name. But, I mean, that's life. I'm not the only Timothy in the world. So, anyway. Okay, Psalm 2. In Psalm 1, I intentionally used the King James Version. I don't know whether it's a blessing or an affliction in the Anglosphere that we have more Bibles than any other language group in the world. I mean, we just have so many Bibles. I think it's somewhat of an affliction. Get into why. But I suppose it's a blessing too. It's probably a reflection of great commitment among a lot of different people. Anyway, I decided to use the King James Version because the King James Version in Psalm 1 picks up that it doesn't neuter vir, if you will. It doesn't neuterize the man. You can have neuterization occurring in some of the newer Bibles where the hope is to be, shall we say, more outreaching or something. But I think the import there is in terms of the history of the church and the original language, we can't afford to neuterize the Psalms. So in that case, particularly, I decided to use the King James Version. Now here, Psalm 2, I replicated the New Revised Standard Version of Psalm 2. And would somebody undertake to read Psalm 2 for us?
Yeah.
Please.
Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds asunder and cast their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord has them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will tell of the decree of the Lord. He said to me, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Now therefore, O kings, be wise. Be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, with trembling. Kiss his feet, or he will be angry, and you will perish in the way. For his wrath is quickly kindled. Happy are all who take refuge in him.
Thank you. Thank you. By the way, often in the Bible, in the Psalmody, in most versions of the Bible that you see, you'll see superscriptive language. You don't see that here on Psalms 1 and 2, but Psalm 3 has superscriptive language in it. 73 of the 150 Psalms in the Psalmody are ascribed to David. And we can tell that, or the assignments are based on the superscriptions that appear over certain Psalms. This particular psalm is not ascribed to David, but it has, according to Father Reardon, and I would agree, Davidic themes in it. Reardon does not, in his book, he doesn't go through on every psalm and say, well, this is an Adamic psalm, or this is a Davidic psalm, or this is a suffering servant psalm. I mean, this is something, basically, I guess he leaves to the reader to do. I've done a tabulation of my own, and it's just like any form of classification system. What's the point of doing it? and two, how good is it when you're all finished and said and done? Often you get a merging of different themes, Davidic, Adamic, and the suffering servant themes come together. And I guess to some extent you would expect that in Christ, because he is 3 in 1. He's 1 in 3. He's one of part of the Trinity, but in himself he also he has these different roles, these different realizations, as it were, as God and man and God. So you get this Davidic theme because you have the theme of a kingdom. I would say that's one reason. My inclination when I've gone through and classified these psalms, and I'll talk maybe in a minute about why I even bother doing it. And I'm suggesting it's something you can do too. It's enlightening activity. Try to figure out where's Christ in here? Well, you have to give it some more specificity. Am I seeing new Adam? New David? Well, here I think it's the new David, because we're talking about kingdoms, for one thing. In the first psalm, we have it's kind of what I call generic life. The blessed man versus the cursed man. But there's no larger ramification, if you will, or a sense of a kingdom of good versus a kingdom of evil or something like that. I think it's more at the domestic level, if you will. And in fact, when I think of the Psalms, I kind of as a kind of default position, I'm always ready to assign them as an Adamic psalm, unless I see strong evidence of something else there. But here we do see something, and we have this references to I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill, so forth and so on. And by the way, I believe in our confessions as a church, we refer to Jesus as begotten, not made. Correct me, Carl, if I'm wrong, but I think that lingo comes probably from Psalm 2. I don't know that for a fact, but that the new David was begotten. Father Reardon in his book refers to these three different kind of personas that Jesus takes on, as I say, the new David, the Adam, the suffering servant. But I'd also say in each of the Psalms, you have what I'll call an Antichrist. Now, I'm not using that term Antichrist in the way perhaps it's used in the book of Revelation. But I'm using it in the sense that there is a polar opposite, almost invariably in all the Psalms, to the Christ figure, whoever that Christ figure is, whether it's the new Adam, the new David, or the suffering servant, there's the polar opposite. In the case of Psalm 1, we've got the new Adam, but we also have the old Adam, the sinner. And of course, if we think of ourselves, we're, thanks be to God, thanks be to our participation in the church, we're both saints and sinners. So, yes, I guess you could say each one of us also appears in these Psalms. To the extent that we live in Christ, that we live out Christ, we're part of the new Adam. But to the extent that we sin, we're part of the old Adam. So I think it helps in reading the Psalms to recognize both the new self that we can be in Christ, but also the old self. It's also still there in us too. And so we don't distance ourselves. We don't become self-righteous and smug or whatever. We see the old self, and we're part of the new kingdom, but we're also part of the old kingdom. The old kingdom, as if you will, in various ways, each of us. So we have Psalm 2. Any comments, questions? Yes.
I'm lost
Okay.
on the 6th verse.
I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. Are you wondering where Zion is?
Well, is it Jerusalem? Is it Israel? Is it a place even?
I think those are all very good questions. Yeah. The old interpretation, if you will, the pre-Christian interpretation of this psalm would be that it is a place. In the Old Testament, it is a place. It is Jerusalem. We have a different geography as Christians. There's a geography for the Jewish. There's a geography for Muslims. And there's a geography for Christians. And I would argue for Christians, Zion is not a place. I mean, not a physical place. I guess we could get off track here and get on a sidetrack. But, throughout the New Testament accounts, in the gospel accounts of Jesus, we have him again and again proclaiming the kingdom is here, is at hand. Where is it? Where are the soldiers? Where are the tax collectors for the kingdom? It's not a conventional kind of kingdom that we as Christians abide by or are citizens of, if you will. And so we're going to read all the Psalms differently than our Jewish brothers and sisters in the faith. I mean, basically our argument to our Jewish brothers and sisters is, you've left out the last of the canon. Would that you would include the New Testament in your canon, but they don't, and so we respect that. But they're going to read it differently than we are. And of course, Muslims are going to read the Psalms differently than we do, for similar reasons. There's a different geography for each of the major Abrahamic faiths.
I could share that's an interpretation of yours.
Yes.
If you would talk to a fundamentalist, they would say, you've got to reestablish it on Zion and Israel, and that's what the Bible's all about.
Yes.
I mean, I think those two
yes, yes. No, that's a good point. Good point, yeah.
You said the Muslims read the Psalms,
Yes.
the Psalms part of the Quran.
No, it's not part of the Quran, but of course, since the Psalms are are among the holy books, that these technically, Muslims, respect. You know, the New Testament and the Old Testament are both, what shall I say, incorporated by reference in the Quran. I was just reading on Wikipedia this weekend too. You know, there's a whole genre of literature within the Muslim faith, even the Psalms. Yeah.
When I read the Psalm 2, I think of God's, especially God the Creator, and His wonderful justice. This psalm, in my mind, is about justice.
Psalm 2.
Psalm 2,
Mm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And, then He will speak to them in His wrath and terrify them in His fury. I mean, He's a righteous, He needs, justice.
Yeah. It makes a difference to God. That's
Yeah.
one of the basic claims of the faith.
Mhm.
Actually, all three of the Abrahamic faiths. It makes a difference to God. Human behavior is important to God. He's not indifferent. For many years, I was an atheist, for 25 years, in fact, and I came back into the faith slowly. It was easier to accept the notion of a creator God than it was to accept the notion of a God who cares about right and wrong. Because obviously there's a lot of wrong in the world, there's evil. Reading this morning about this girl who was tortured here, right here in this area. People, it's appalling. But anyway, so, but I do believe in a God that cares about right and wrong. Thanks be to His Spirit. But I got feet of clay too. Anyway, by the way, here in the Psalm 2, we do have the Antichrist, if you will. We have the Christ figure of the anointed one, the one who's begotten by me, but we also have, the kings who are against him. Notice too, Psalm 2, we still do not have any petition. This, as Father Reardon would call it, is a narrative psalm. There's a story here. It's kind of a beginning and an end. It's a very primitive story. It's not an extended or long story, but there is a narrative sequence here, as it were. To me, this is just another kind of prophetic psalm. The two major categories in my mind are meditative and narrative, but that's another day and another thing. Let's go to Psalm 3, because here we have the very first petitionary prayer in the book of Psalms. And when somebody undertakes to read Psalm 3. Psalm 3, anybody? Okay, please, thank you.
O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying to me, there is no help for you in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, and the one who lifts up my head. I cry aloud to the Lord, and He answers me from His holy hill. I lie down and sleep. I wake again, for the Lord sustains me. I am not afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me all around. Rise up, O Lord, deliver me, O my God, for you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Deliverance belongs to the Lord. May your blessing be on your people.
Thank you. Well, here we have the suffering servant. And of course, it's a theme that comes to the top, the peak of our attention now in the coming days leading up to Good Friday. The notion of the suffering servant has believe was first broached in the Old Testament in Isaiah. I don't see my references here. But trust me, there's plenty of it in Isaiah. It is in Isaiah. I can't give you the specific verse references, but Isaiah has raises the suffering servant theme, and then we get it in spades throughout the Psalms. There's many Psalms, and all of the Psalms fit together, as you will, but as I say, some of them have certain emphases, and there's almost a sense of paranoia, but it's not paranoia, it's for real, of persecution. And of course, for us in the Western Church, if there's any persecution that we see in our society of Christians, it's what I call soft persecution. It's cultural indifference or whatever, but it's not, there isn't anybody out running around and arresting Christians in the middle of the night, killing them or raping them. But you can be sure before this day is over, how many Christians are going to die, raped, or have their homes pillaged, and children killed before their eyes because they are Christian. It happens every day. Christians are the most persecuted religious group in the world. We don't think of that, but that happens. And I don't suggest that we should have a persecution complex or anything, but it's there. In many various ways, the world is not receptive to Jesus Christ. And God suffers. And that's, I think, one of the messages of the New Testament is that God suffers. Some people would claim, no, that can't happen. God can't suffer. He's beyond suffering. And that's the easy kind of God. That was the kind of God that I was first able to accept when I came back from atheism. The creator God made it all, left it alone, all works according to laws, and he's indifferent. But that's not the God that is revealed even in the Old Testament. We see in the witness of Jesus Christ, God suffers for our sake. We don't have to do any of this. Anyway, so we have here in Psalm 3, the first petition, the first time that God is addressed in the second person. Oh God, God is being addressed. And curiously in the Psalms, you'll find God, in the same psalm, it's not unusual to see God addressed in the second person and then referred to in the third person. So what happens is, what I want to say is, what I would say, the way to kind of think of this is that in the same psalm, you can have a petitionary element and you can have a prophetic element where you're talking about God. And when I think of how I pray, you know, this goes on all the time. You know, going from second to third person. And thanks be to God, thanks be to the Psalms, I can tell myself, hey, Tim, this is not crazy, it's okay. In the Psalms, you see this too, going on. The churches and the faithful have canonized these forms of behavior. It's okay. It's okay in the same prayer to be addressing God in the second person and then subsequently be talking about Him, thinking about Him, having some kind of narration or meditation about it, and then going back to in the second person. So you have these movements. And there are even some psalms where you have all three voices, first, second, and third, where the psalmist addresses God, talks about God, and God speaks. Psalms 32, 50, 75, and 95 are the four that come to mind, where you have all three voices, first, second, and third voice. And God is speaking too in the psalm. So, but in this entry psalm here, we simply have third person, and it's prototypical. Obviously, Mr. Reardon says this is a petitional prayer, and And the persona here that we're seeing of Jesus is that of the suffering servant. Well,
Can you, before you go on,
Yes.
can you just talk a little bit about the Selah
the Salah,
Yeah.
that's written there, so everybody
Yeah.
kind of knows what that instruction is about?
what did we do? My sense, and Carl correct me, Carl, as I think most of you know, is retired. Actually, never fully retired, so point of reference here in this room. But my sense is that no one really knows exactly what Salah means. It seems to be some kind of instruction in terms of, it seems to be like a pause place. Maybe it's instructive. You know, since all of these psalms were put to music, they're still put to music. We can put them to music here. We don't ordinarily. Is it a rest stop? There's no way, as far as I've read about this, there's not a lot, but some about Salah, and as far as I can tell, there's no one that really knows exactly what it means.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think there's a strong, I think Lutherans have to go to an African-American church to understand Selah. Because we're kind of taught to shut up when we go to worship. And if you ever are in a black congregation singing, all of a sudden there will be an amen.
Kind of a call response.
Which means the truth is being spoken.
We're affirming what you've just said.
Right. And it's a response that says, this is the bottom line, this is truth, this is power. And we do it when we come to the end of the Lord's Prayer. Amen. So I think that's maybe one of the closer understanding of Salah.
Okay.
A Muslim would understand this in their prayer life. They know what that is.
So the next time we read this, we'll have to have a Salah course.
Amen, brother.
But, right, there you go. But in the Lutheran Church, of
Salah.
course, it would be formally set up to,
Right, yes.
not just ad hoc.
Well, what about in a Jewish service, or when the psalm was being read in a synagogue?
Yeah.
Do the Jews, what, did they respond, or are they,
Well, I
are they
think-
like us?
Yeah. One of my favorite, maybe I'm going off on a tangent here, but one of my favorite quotes of Martin Luther is that the faith is sung into our hearts more than it's pounded into our heads. And he was a great musician and also an Old Testament psalm scholar. And he understands, as we all do, the importance of coming to a point to accent a refrain or whatever, you know what I'm saying, to kind of, you've got that here, where you've got the refrain of the Psalms and stuff like that. And I think so the emphasis is, again, how to know, to get, like the service today, it wasn't a sermon, it was music. You know what I'm trying to say, with few words, you know what I'm saying? But there was refrains, came back repeating certain little phrases, you know what I'm saying?
Right,
It's meant to be sung, chanted,
well, we certainly memorize things better when things are sung.
I'm sorry?
People remember better sing-song.
This is an absolute oral culture before literacy. I mean, it's meant to kind of sink in
Right.
in a powerful way.
And a different, Carl's point here, made in a somewhat different way, the poetic structure of the Psalms.
Right.
There's this parallelism, this
Right.
characteristic.
For the sake of memory.
Memory, yeah, repetition.
And they
Immediate
follow the
repetition.
Hebrew alphabet, so you know A, B, C, D, E, is little gimmicks to kind of hold on to the order.
Right, right. So, well, there's such a corpus, 150 psalms in all, that they can be drawn on in many different ways, and the church draws on them in ways that are traditional. There's a role for tradition in the church. scripture and authority. But anyway, the role of tradition, we see that particularly in how the Psalms are used. And at least in the days when this Sunday was just Palm Sunday, pardon me, and not Passion Sunday also. Psalm 24 was a favorite psalm to read on Palm Sunday. Does anyone want to read that? And you can just see how, the theme here is going to be Davidic. Christ is the Davidic. Anyone want to read Psalm 24? Yes, please.
The earth is the Lord's, and all that is in it, the world, and those who live in it. For he has founded it on the seas, and established it on the rivers. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord, and who shall stand in his holy place? Those who have clean hands and pure hearts, who do not lift up their souls to what is false, and do not swear deceitfully. They will receive blessing from the Lord and vindication from the God of their salvation. Such is the company of those who seek him, who seek the face of the God of Jacob.
Salah.
Lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty, the Lord, mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory.
Salah.
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 Yeah. Thank you. Well, you can see why this would be read on Palm Sunday. But this is no longer just Palm Sunday, and I don't know when, Carl, I don't know when they shifted to Passion Sunday. I did some research in preparation for today, just on this thing, Passion Sunday and Palm Sunday, because I wanted to see when it became Passion Sunday. And I looked at old hymnals here in the library, and gosh, it was already Passion Sunday over 100 years ago. The Catholic Church also observes it as Passion Sunday.
It's one of the most confusing things that go on in the hearts of Lutherans.
You mean that we're doing the same thing as the
Well,
Catholics? Or that we're observing two things on one day?
Right, that we're so used to being confirmed on Palm Sunday or having certain traditions and rituals that it doesn't seem right that it's all packed into 1 hour and we've got the whole week to live out the Passion.
Right.
So we go, I don't like this, to get it over with on Palm Sunday. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I know, it's
And then the
kind
other,
of distressing for me.
feel right. Lutherans really feel kind of discomfort, but what happened to Palm Sunday?
Yeah, right.
But I think the other side of the story is, we like to go from Palm Sunday to Easter and skip Good Friday. You
Yeah.
know, we don't want to deal with the suffering God in our culture. So you don't find many people in church on Good Friday. We all show up on Palm Sunday and Easter.
And so they felt the
We-
need
we
to bring the
kinda-
Passion into,
Yeah, we kind of
Sunday
skip the yucky
Easter.
stuff. And so I think there is also unless you're a good, strong liturgical Roman who understands that 3 days of Good Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, that all tie together.
well,
It's confusing.
it is confusing and it's noisy, if I may say so. It's just like, if your favorite song were all compressed into one instant, every note played at the same time.
Right.
It would no longer be music. And so we get more noise when we compress things.
Called cacophony, you're right. But
Yeah.
sometimes
It's unfortunate.
major and minor comes together in strange ways.
In strange ways. Thanks be to God. The church goes on, warts and all. It's about time to wrap things up here, so I'll take any questions from the floor and then we'll have a closing prayer. We've had plenty of prayers this morning, but
I wanted to go back to Psalm 1. I notice in the Revised Standard Version, it takes out the man, makes it people.
yeah, that's a loss.
Probably because of politics for one thing. When they came out with the Revised Standard Version and the new Revised Standard Version, the need to take out the male references, even if it was intended, as you say, and the author that you referred to says, that it was intended to be a male reference and not people.
Yeah, there is a loss, and this is not the only psalm where that kind of loss occurs, of course. I applaud in some ways the desire to reach people of both sexes, but I do know, despite all that's gone on through the years, all this maleness in the church, when you look at most churches, there's a distinct, strong, feminine flavor to most congregations. And it's just true culturally throughout Christianity. I've talked to people in the African church too. Same issue. Women are more dedicated to the faith than men. I mean, if you will, we're taking numbers down.
A study's been done just recently, and the Eastern Orthodox have a much stronger male tradition.
Thanks be to God. We're doing something right.
Well, it's true, that the men are in church.
It is a problem. It is a problem, I think, for the faith. It is a problem for the faith. It's wonderful. I would much rather be in a feminized religion than a masculinized religion. If I can put it that way, for several reasons. We'll leave it at that. But it is an issue that the church, I think, has to address. Why aren't more men engaged in the life of the church? What are we doing wrong? Well, I leave that with a question. Any other questions before closing prayer? Okay. Thanks be to you, O Lord, our God and our Savior, for sending your saving word into our life. May we live out your